business partnerships is a marriage and it should be
Yep.
looked at as a marriage, in my
Yep.
opinion.
I agree. And we should have looked at it that way too, but we were green, we were hungry, the upsell business had kind of fallen flat and we were trying to find ways to make cash, and we could have very easily just told this guy,
I
"Listen,
would
we'll
like to
get
take a 10-minute break and then three, two, one. How do you have the ability to analyze stocks?
Welcome to the Generations of Wealth podcast. I am your host, Derek Dombeck, and today's guest, and this is a really cool conversation for any of you that have thought about scaling your business or getting business partners. Just what Ben Allgeyer is going to talk about is just real life. He's currently working on Novations and doing a lot of wholesaling using AI and a lot of tools. But before I bring Ben on, this is what it's all about, right? Guests and myself sharing our experiences. I hope you heed some of this advice and really take it in and think it through, because we do this because we've done it. We've done things well. We've made plenty of mistakes. And this is also about building your network. So part of that is let me help you build your network. Let me help you with anything that you need. So feel free to reach out, derekdombeck.com, thegenerationsofwealth.com. And with that intro being done, let's bring on our guest. And here he is, all the way from Kansas City, Missouri, not Kansas City, Kansas. Ben Allgeyer, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing well. How are you?"
I'm well, man. Thanks for joining us on the Generations of Wealth podcast. Before we dive into a great conversation, why don't you just tell the audience a little bit about yourself, and we'll move on from there.
Yeah, sounds good. It's the classic story, going to college to become a doctor and realizing that path was just not what I wanted to do after dedicating 8 years of my life to doing that. So quit, took a hard left turn, went into corporate for about 11 months, and that just was not fun for me. Realized I was a just awful employee. And then figured I needed to find a way to make money outside of being a corporate guy. Was always an entrepreneur, had a cooler company back in college that paid for my college. So dove into real estate and kind of found my landing there. Went back to Kansas City after spending some time down in Arizona, and traveling abroad, and then helped a guy build his acquisitions team. And after about a year of that, realized that I could probably do this on my own. Didn't need to build somebody else's team. So that's exactly what we did. And now I think we're year 9 into this, and we've flipped hundreds of houses, wholesaled hundreds more. And yeah, I've learned a lot over the course of the last 9 years. And then we also bought a couple businesses too. So we're kind of all over the place with what we do.
Nice. I always like having conversations with people that have been in this business for different lengths of time, because we start talking about market shifts and things like that. So being in it for 9 years, you kind of came in 2017-ish.
Hmm.
Market was steadily increasing, property values were going up. How have you transitioned from when you began to maybe what you're doing today?
It's a good question. So the first company that we had was called Upsell Homes. And what we would do is back then, it was kind of imperative that homeowners had houses that were updated to get max value out of them. So we would go do a bang for your buck remodel on people's homes and then list them for them. So we would get, a little percentage of profit off of the construction, and then we would get the listing commission. We did that for a couple years until the market took a turn, and we saw that, homeowners could just list their property on the market and sell it immediately. There were, 15 offers day one. It was crazy. So they didn't need us anymore. So we pivoted because we were so good at the construction. My business partner actually has a background of like 25 years in construction, commercial tenant finish, flipping houses, all kinds of different stuff on the construction side. So we just started buying as many houses as we could from wholesalers and flipped, at one point we were doing like 20, 25 houses at a time.
Hmm.
Um, yeah. So when that shifted, we're like, yeah, let's just go buy everything that we can, flip them and make our cash that way. And it was really good. And then we had some things come up in the business that kind of set us back a little bit. We can dive into those later if you want to. But now mostly what we do is novations and wholesales, and we'll cherry pick some flips. Just the headache of flipping houses and flipping houses at volume it is not a game that I would recommend for a lot of people unless you have a ton of experience and you don't want to have a life.
Man, you said a mouthful there, and been there, done that, got the t-shirt. Um, I'll go back in time a little bit. When you were working with homeowners, how were you contractually protecting yourself when you were putting money into their houses and doing the updates?
Yeah, so our contract, if I remember correctly, our contract was, they could either, because what would happen every once in a while is a homeowner, we would do the remodel of their house and they're like, I love the house now. I don't want to leave.
Hmm.
So we tried to make it to where we were only working on houses where homeowners had already moved out of the house. So they weren't planning on moving back in, which protected us, a lot on the front end. But some of those people that were still living in the house, our contract basically said, we're going to file a lien on your house that will be cleared at closing. You are aware that the whole intent of doing this is to sell the property. If you decide you want to stay, the amount that we, put into the house and the profit that we had built in, I think we had, you know, 15-20% profit built into the construction side. That went up to 55%.
Okay.
So if they didn't leave, then we immediately called. I mean, you can't really call the note, but it was essentially calling that and saying, hey, listen, you got to pay us now. So that's kind of how we protected ourselves on that front. And we didn't really run across any issues because we were very good on the front end explaining that to homeowners, that listen, you're not staying here. If you want to, it's going to cost you and it's going to be super painful.
Well, and I've done the same thing. And typically what I have done is I put an option in place. And we'll probably dive into the novations that you're doing now compared
Yeah.
to holding options and the pros and cons. Um, but by putting an option in place, it very much does the same thing that you just said. Um, but I also would record a mortgage against their property, securing my option.
Nice.
So in the event that they refuse to sell to who we wanted to sell to, or refuse to let us buy it or whatever, we actually could start a foreclosure action against them.
Brilliant. Yeah, we didn't do any of that. I was 22 back then, so I didn't really know what I didn't know. So
Yeah. So, um, okay. So then moving forward, and I think we're going to kind of get back to that once we start talking about how you're doing novations. But so moving forward to now, you said you are just cherry picking flips and doing a lot of wholesaling. Have you found it challenging to find deals as the market transitioned? And also you did mention kind of a hiccup in your business, if you want to elaborate on that.
yeah, for sure. So something that's very important. We'll start with the hiccup. If you're going to bring a business partner into your business, you better damn well be sure that you have your paperwork in place. We brought a business partner in, me and my other partner brought a business partner in, and it was more of a like boys club, let's go do a bunch of deals and we're all going to work really hard. And it worked for about 2 years. We were making a load of money. Like we had months where we were clearing $200,000 plus of net profit. The third partner got complacent. He was fat and happy, and he just stopped working. He would come into the office about 10 or 11 o'clock and go home at 2, and we wouldn't hear from him or see him again. And that carried on for months and months and months. And he was saying, yeah, I'm still working on deals. And then the deals dried up because we were buying everything from wholesalers from his connections. So when the deals started to dry up, we're like, well, we have 3 people that we have to support. What are we going to do about this? And our paperwork was not put together very well.
Hmm.
So when we tried to get him out of the business, he sued us and it cost us $250,000 to get them to go away. So that put us back. So at that point, we had to go figure out how to find deals. So what I started to do was I started pulling foreclosure lists and driving around the city and knocking on doors.
Mm.
And we bought a ton of houses, a ton of houses. We were doing 8 to 10 deals a month. And the spreads on those deals, I think we were averaging like $42,000 per deal on all of those deals. It was crazy. So that's how we kind of transitioned into the next phase of the business. And what was your initial question that you asked me?
I guess you kind of answered it as far as your hiccup, but
Yeah,
let's not gloss over that because it's very, very important. And I've been through partnerships over my 2+ decades in this business, and um, the last partnership, which ended amicably after 10 years, we did have buy-sell agreements in place. We had all of the what ifs put in place at the beginning because of previous experience from
yep,
previous partnerships. And we didn't have to get mean or nasty about anything when we were decided to part ways. It was just our visions were no longer in alignment of what we wanted for that business. So we had a hard money lending company, which my regular listeners know, and a house acquisition company. And so we both knew what we were good at and what we wanted moving forward. It was a pretty easy separation. But so many people just, like you said, handshake deal. We're just going to go have fun and do this. And it's great while it's great. And when it goes bad, it goes bad
bad,
and,
fast.
and fast. And then it's he said, she said, and I thought this, I thought that, right?
And attorneys get involved. And when attorneys get involved, no one wins.
It's very much a divorce. And that's
Yeah,
the way I explain to people. Are you getting into business on a one night stand or are you getting married?
I like that.
And if you're going to do a one night stand, at least have a JV agreement in place, in case you need some penicillin when it's all over.
Yeah,
But, you know, business partnerships is a marriage and it should be
yep,
looked at as a marriage, in my
yep.
opinion.
I agree. And we should have looked at it that way too. But we were green, we were hungry. The upsell business had kind of fallen flat, and we were trying to find ways to make cash. And we could have very easily just told this guy, listen, we'll give you profit share. We did not need to bring him in as a 33% partner of the business. We
Hmm.
could have just given him profit share. And when he stopped producing, see ya.
Yeah, for
We
sure.
didn't.
Well, the other thing you said, which I love, was door knocking because so many people think that they're going to get shot if they knock on somebody's door. And it's an incredible way. When I buy a house, the first thing I do is go knock on all the neighbors' doors, let them know what our intention is, what we're going to do to
Yep,
improve their neighborhood. Hey, do you know anybody that might want to live in this neighborhood? They can help find, pick their neighbor to a certain degree. And usually you've got a built-in security system
for
because
sure.
I tell them all, listen, if you see anything happening, shoot first, ask questions later, and then call me, you know?
That
So
works in some states. Be
it
careful in
does.
other states.
So what was your experience like door knocking?
Uh, it's tough at first. I mean, I'm not gonna lie to you and say that it was always easy. That it was, I just got in my truck and drove around. The first guy I knocked on his door, he said, "Yeah, let me sell your house. Let me sell you my house for pennies on the dollar." That's not the experience. But it's a volume game like anything in real estate. The more doors you knock on, the more comfortable you get. You learn how to approach things. It's not knock on the door and stand this close to the door. So when they open the door, you're right in their face.
Hmm.
You take a few steps back. You go, "Hey, man, I know I'm here super out of the blue. Just noticed that your lender had scheduled a sale. Do you happen to have that handled? Because if you don't, I may have some resources to help you." That's it. And when you build that muscle, it's just like going to the gym. When you build that muscle of knocking on doors, it becomes fun. I don't I'm not a big runner, so I know when people talk about a runner's high, it's probably the same experience, but with the knocking on doors, there's a lot of things that you're not gonna have figured out when you go and knock on your first door. And that's okay. You will learn and get better. And I'm sure that first conversation I had with a homeowner at his door was awful, but it just got better and better and better. And then by the end of it, I mean, you couldn't put a person in this city in front of a homeowner at their door and have me there too and think that I wasn't going to get that deal over somebody else. That was just the mindset that I went into this with of I'm getting that deal. If there's a deal to be had, I'm getting it.
Yeah. Did you take any kind of training on door knocking, or did you just learn it as you went?
Just learned it as I went.
Yeah. So I got a buddy who, I mean, he built an entire business on door knocking for
Yeah.
decades, and he would take people out. And so he came up to our market one time, and I think we had 25 of us, and we're door knocking as a group of 25 people. And homeowners would invite us in, all of us, into
Yeah.
their home and sit there and literally sit at the kitchen table and write up offers, you know.
That's awesome.
And back then, my daughter was like 11 at the time. She's 19 now, but he had my daughter writing offers and knocking on doors. And he would use that as an example when he was teaching. He'd have a slide in his presentation of my, 11-year-old daughter writing an offer and shaming adults that are too scared to knock on a door. And he's like, well, look, McKenna can do it. Why can't you? Right.
Yeah.
But it really is, honestly, other than your time and your fuel, it's a no cost marketing strategy that has been proven to work forever, from
Forever.
thousands of years ago, right? You knock on a door, start a conversation. And people in general are kind. They don't want to pull a gun or stab you,
No.
if you're there with the right intentions.
Correct.
Yeah.
It's a different game though, right? I mean, with the world that we live in of instant gratification, there's so many people that get into real estate, and I see it too because we have a community where we teach people how to do real estate. And I tell people all the time, go knock on doors. If you are brand new to this business, go knock on doors. They don't want to pick up the phone, one, so it's tough to get them to go knock on doors, but they think that they're going to get into real estate and make a boatload of money by doing what? By just saying you're a real estate investor? That's not how this works. You got to go out and do the thing. And do the thing that most people are afraid to do because you're going to have success that other people don't have if you're willing to do those things.
Absolutely. Do you still find yourself knocking on doors?
I don't anymore since we acquired a painting company and a security company. I don't have the time to go and knock on. I spend most of my time right here in front of the screen.
Yeah. But the cool thing is it's muscle memory. Like you could go knock on a door today
For
and
sure.
it would all come back immediately.
My wife actually gets a little irritated because if we're driving around, I will stop the truck. If I see a crappy house, I will stop the truck and go knock on the door. She's like, "What are we doing? We have somewhere to be." I'm like, "Yeah, but that house right there could pay for your new car that you want. Just let me go and knock on the damn door."
Yeah, for sure. I find myself, regardless of where I am, I want everybody to know who I am and what I do, even if it's in an elevator for 30 seconds.
Yeah.
So I'll start a conversation with literally anybody. And by the time that conversation is done, they're going to know I'm a real estate investor and what I do and what I could do for them.
Yep.
And I've raised millions of dollars over the years. And that was going to be my next question, funding deals. But, I've always used private capital for the last 15, 16 years.
Same.
And it's the same thing. Just start a conversation with somebody. Some of my listeners have heard this story, but I was calling a guy to buy a house from him. And within a few minutes, I knew that we were never going to buy his house. So then I transitioned the conversation into the fact that I owned a lending company and we raised private capital and lent that out to landlords and house flippers. What was he going to do with the money once he sold his house? Because he had already told me it was free and clear.
Yeah.
And 4 months later, when he sold the house, he invested over $300,000 in our lending company. Wow. And within another 6 months, he put another $500,000 in our fund from a dead real estate lead that most people would have just said, "Okay, have a nice day," and hung up the phone.
Moved on.
So just know what you can do and then transition. You've already paid for that lead. However you got that lead, it costs you time and money.
Yep.
Try and leave value and try and, take it as far as you can take it.
Isn't it crazy to think that, this business is not so cut and dry? You can be so creative with the things that you're doing. Like even when we're talking to homeowners now, my acquisitions team, they'll be like, "Ben, I've got this homeowner. I don't know what to do with them." And then we'll just come up with something creative that we've never done before.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Like what we do with some novations now is, if it's a house that's in a remote area, because we get leads from all over the country. So if it's in a super remote or rural area and there's no comparables, like we had one the other day that this guy's got in Tennessee. He's got 7.5 acres that are subdivided sitting on a mountaintop, plus a cottage that's a different parcel with a 1 acre lot next to it. And I'm like, I can't comp that. What the hell are we going to do with this thing? So I told the acquisition team, I'm like, listen, tell him this is going to be a ton of work, which it is. Tell him we'll get him as much as we possibly can doing the novation, and we'll just take a flat fee. So, that's not usually what we do on a novation. We give him a guaranteed number and we take whatever is above that number. But on this one, I'm like, if he's okay with that and recognizes the value in what we're doing, let's go that route.
Well, let's transition into novations. Most people know what they are, or at least have heard the word novation, but why don't you just give a brief definition of novation?
Yeah. And one final point that I want to make on the last thing that we were talking about. Growing up, I spent all of my time in textbooks. Like I had this idea from the time I was 8 years old that I was going to be a doctor. So every day at school, growing up, going to high school, going to college, I just lived in the library. I was not an extroverted person. I didn't know how to have a conversation with somebody. Like I was that introverted of a human being that when I jumped into this world, it's completely different. You have to be able to talk to people. But if you're introverted, if you're listening to this and you're super introverted, it's okay. You can learn the skill of being able to talk to people.
Yeah, not that you even knew about this, but I have a negotiations training that I put out, and it's called No Means Not Yet. And it's very much about how to lead a conversation, which is all a negotiation is, down a path without being manipulative. And it doesn't matter if you're introverted or extroverted, you have to understand how to talk to people. And it's a skill that is very much learned, but most people don't take the time to go and learn that skill. As
For
you
sure.
mentioned, they get into real estate investing and think, oh, I'm going to make a bunch of money, but I don't want to do anything. Well, part of that doing is learning how to talk to people. If you're going to spend thousands of dollars a month getting leads and you don't know how to convert those leads or talk to people, you're just pissing in the wind.
Yeah, what's the
You know?
point?
So anybody that wants that, go to nomeansnotyet.com and check it out. So Ben didn't set me up for that, but I figured I'd mention it anyways.
There you go.
All right, so novations.
Novations. Yeah. So a novation is basically a hybrid between a wholesale and a retail market listing. And the reason that somebody would want to go with somebody like us to do a novation is they're going to get more than what an investor can pay cash. Because an investor, when all of us are running our numbers on what we can pay cash, we have to bake in our profit. With a novation, we can sell the deal to an end buyer that is a retail buyer. Retail buyers don't come into a house and go, how much money can I make on this house? They look at it as a home that they're going to live in. They're willing to pay more. They go get financing to pay more for the house. So our pitch to homeowners is, listen, there's a reason that you haven't gone with a real estate agent, which you 100% can, but it sounds like you probably don't want to do that. And then when they say, well, why wouldn't I want to do that? Well, I mean, are you okay with people just coming in and out of your house at different times? Are you okay with like making this house look like the Taj Mahal at all times so that when people are walking through it, it's all cleaned up and shows nice? Are you okay with doing repairs? I mean, do you have the cash if it's a VA or an FHA buyer where they come in and they have to have things done before they can close? Do you have the cash to be able to cover that? Do you think that your real estate agent that you get is going to cover those costs for you? Probably not.
Yeah.
So that's where we go with the novation pitch. And, oftentimes it's not even less than what they would get on the market because we know as investors, if you've been in this business for any period of time, most real estate agents are really bad at their jobs. They will overprice a house or they will take an offer that was never an offer that was going to close. And you and I both know that if there is an offer that is a little wishy-washy and the buyer ends up bailing on the deal, when you go back on the market, one, you have extra days on market, and two, regardless of if you put in the show in the description, buyer fell through at no fault to seller, you are losing $10,000 on that deal overnight by going back on the market, because every other buyer that sees that house is going to go, well, why did this thing fall out of contract? Why did that other buyer not want to buy the house? There's got to be something wrong with it. So we know how to price houses. We know to not look at these things emotionally like a lot of real estate agents will, just to get a sign in the yard. And that's where our benefit comes in with a novation.
So how are you papering a novation?
We've got just our simple PSA, and then we've got a novation document that goes with it that basically says we can replace the contract. And then we have a LPOA at the end of it. So we use a system called Proof on the computer. It works in some states to be able to do an online virtual notary. But, you know, we will send everybody through Proof, and then our transaction coordination team, if they say this thing needs to be wet signed, we will just go back to the seller and have a notary go out there and wet sign it.
So what's your recourse if a seller backs out or refuses to show up at closing?
We file an affidavit or a memorandum. So, you know, we are very, like I said with the upsell stuff, we are very, very diligent on the front end by making sure homeowners understand what they're getting themselves into and all of the stipulations of the deal. So, you know, if you head that off on the front end, you have a hell of a lot less trouble on the back end when you're trying to close. We haven't had a single homeowner not show up to closing, knock on wood, for these novations, regardless of what our fee is. I had a guy the other day that called and said, "You're going to make 40 grand on this deal." I said, "Yeah, but I did exactly what I told you I was going to do. Got this thing sold for you, cleaned out the house for you, found an agent that was going to list this thing for us. And, you know, you live 3 hours away. Are you planning on starting all over and doing this over again?" He said, "No, I'm okay with you making 40 grand.
So let's play devil's advocate. If they refuse to sell, you sign a notice or a memorandum or an affidavit. One thing, and this is only specific to Wisconsin, but anybody listening should find out what their state laws are. Last fall in 2025 in Wisconsin, there was new laws that came into play where you can't just file a notice on somebody's property anymore. And I'm happy about this, by the way, because I actually had a tenant that got evicted, and he had a subletter living with him. The tenant moved out, the subletter refused to move out. So when I finally got him to leave, he went to the courthouse and filed a $25,000 mechanics lien fraudulently. It took us almost 6 months to get that cloud off the title, and our recourse is $1,500 is all we and our attorney's fees to try and get that title cleared from that bullshit claim.
Yep.
So filing that notice or that affidavit or that memorandum may or may not work for you in your state, and you got to know that. But besides that, okay, you file this notice or this affidavit. What happens next in that scenario?
Well, if they don't come to closing, and again, like I said, we haven't had anybody do this. So I would say if it comes to that, you probably didn't do a good job of explaining it to the homeowner. There's a reason that the homeowner's getting, you know, wishy-washy about wanting to close, and it's probably because you didn't do your job on the front end. Just because you have a contract doesn't mean you have money. And all of us know this who have been in this business for longer than 5 minutes. Things are going to go wrong, and damn near every deal, it doesn't go as smooth as you think it's going to go. So if you don't have a transparent, honest, very, you know, fully disclosed conversation with the homeowner on the front end, you are going to have issues at the closing table.
Right. So if you sue them to get paid, that's one route, or you just wait until they try to sell the property to somebody else, and they will have to clear you at that time. But that could be years.
Could be.
But if you sue them, and I'm taking you down a path for a reason.
Yeah. If
you sue them, you're going to court and you're arguing contract law, right? And I think we could agree that it's very much based on the judge's opinion of what the intent of that contract was.
Yep.
as to if you win a judgment or not, correct?
Yep. Correct.
Okay. So now you win the judgment. How do you get paid?
We have never sued a homeowner
Mm-hmm.
because it's just a nightmare of a process.
Right.
We
So,
typically will just wait until they try to sell the house. And especially like most of the time on an ovation, if we go put money into the house, we are going to file that affidavit
mhm,
because we now have cash invested in this property based off of a deal that we signed.
right.
At that point, maybe we would go and pursue some sort of legal action because we want to recoup our losses. But, we've never had to go down that route. Um, we just, if we file an affidavit on a house that we haven't put any cash into, but we did everything that we said, we were ready, willing, and able buyer, put our earnest money down, we'll just wait until they sell the house.
Yep. So earlier in our conversation, I mentioned options and securing those options. And this is why it's essentially a novation. I mean, it's very similar process. Okay. But instead, the homeowner signs an option, which that's what, just like your novation contract, that's what dictates the length of time, what they're going to get for the house. And then I have them pledge a mortgage securing that option. And most people are like, well, wait a minute, a mortgage, that's when there's a loan. But a mortgage is just a security instrument or a deed of trust, depending what state you're in.
Yep.
It's just a security instrument that secures an agreement. So if the agreement is not followed through on, you have a right to take the property. Now, typically, we're in a junior position behind existing debt or something else. So, but it does give us a right to foreclose and actually take that property back. Now, or take that away from them. And it doesn't mean they don't get paid, right? They still have a right to get what was contractually theirs. But here's where it works really well. Typically, when I have an option, we also have limited power of attorney. We can sell and list that property as the owner's power of attorney. So if the end buyer is using FHA financing, for example, and there's seasoning requirements on title, length of ownership, we've never owned it, but how we actually get paid when the seller sells directly to our buyer is we're a mortgage payoff on the closing statement. So it does not trip up any underwriting.
Interesting.
They just look at it as a loan payoff, even though it's not. They're really buying our option back from us.
You'll have to send me that paperwork if you don't mind.
It's really no different, okay, than like the option. Everyone says, "Can I have your option paperwork?" Every option is different, just like every novation is different. You're
Yeah.
just drawing up the language in the option to what was agreed upon. So if it says I'm gonna, if there's a lease involved with it, because we actually need possession of the property to do some work to it, like you do, then there's a lease and an option and a mortgage securing it. But the option itself just says what the terms of the agreement are. The mortgage is no different than any other mortgage, except on the top of it, where normally it would say this mortgage dated, March 18th, 2026, secures a note dated March 18th, 2026. It would say this mortgage dated so on secures an option dated same date.
Got it.
And then typically I put the dollar amount in there of what our strike price is or what our purchase price is. So it also helps the homeowner because anybody that does a title search, they see that and they think it's a loan because they don't look any further. They don't actually read.
Yeah.
They're like, oh gosh, you're buying this for $200,000. So they think is a $200,000 loan. They may have $100,000 worth of debt. So it appears as if they're over leveraged when in fact they're not. So it's a little bit of asset protection for the homeowner as well. Okay.
Interesting.
But here's when we go back to what I talked to you about lawsuits. You're arguing contract law when you file an affidavit if you sue them. If you win, you get a judgment. Now you have to collect on a judgment.
Correct.
If I foreclose on a homeowner, which I've never had to do this,
Mhm.
just like you haven't had to, but if I foreclose, I'm getting the property, which is what we wanted from the get-go.
Yep.
If that person decided to try and go around me and somehow sells it to somebody else and it actually closes, which shouldn't be able to happen, but it has to
Yeah,
others, well, now you're going after title insurance, or you're going after the seller and the third party that bought it from them. They didn't do anything wrong, right? So would I rather have a judgment against somebody and now have to try and collect on that judgment, or would I rather have the property? I want the property.
for sure.
And we're not arguing contract law, we're arguing foreclosure law.
Yep.
Way more black and white and less room for opinions of a judge.
Fair.
And the best part about having that mortgage is during that option period, if the homeowner wanted to refinance, they're going to reach out to you and say, hey, Derek, what's the payoff on your mortgage? Well, what's the homeowner trying to do? Right? I can't have them over leverage the property over and above my option price.
For sure.
And their new lender is not going to subordinate to me. So now it's new negotiation time. They want to buy out my option? Cool, let's talk about it. But I'm going to get called, and I make it very clear how to get a hold of me on my mortgages. Email address, phone numbers, mailing address. Like, I want you to be able to find me to call me about a payoff.
Well, let me ask you this. Do you have any issues getting a homeowner to sign a fat stack of documents? Because it
Well,
sounds like this is probably a larger stack of documents, isn't it?
Not really, and that's the fun part. So the lease, if we are leasing it, that's standard. The option is about 4 pages, and the mortgage is 2 pages. But here's where it gets fun. If somebody says, well, why would I pledge a mortgage against my property? And I've gone round and round with attorneys on this, which is even more fun for me.
Yeah.
So they'll say, well, why would I pledge a mortgage? And I said, well, the mortgage just secures our agreement. Are you not planning on following through with our agreement? Well, of course not. Of course I'm going to follow through. Well, then why would you have a problem pledging a mortgage?
Yeah.
But I had a guy, we were in full agreement on the deal, and he said, well, can we have a 3-way call with my attorney? Attorney's name was Scott. And I know of him. I hadn't met him before, but he's local. I said, yeah, absolutely. Because if I say no, the deal's dead.
Yeah.
Right. So we get a 3-way call with his attorney, and his attorney says, well, I don't understand why you want this mortgage. And I said, well, because that's what secures our agreement. He said, well, why don't you just file the option, record the option? I said, I don't want my terms of my option on public record for the whole world to see. So then he says, why don't you file a memorandum of option? I said, because that isn't the way I conduct my business. I require a mortgage securing our agreement. And he said, well, how do I know when your option expires that you'll satisfy that mortgage? I said, well, Scott, just draft up a satisfaction. We'll sign it. You hold it in escrow. The day the option expires, you record the satisfaction.
Yep.
So that kind of satisfied him. Well, at the end of the conversation, he's like, well, I can't in good conscience advise my client to do this. I said, no problem. I'm out. 3 minutes after that conversation, the seller called me and said, I don't give a shit what Scott said. We're doing this deal. Right. But here's the fun part. I have a PhD, a public high school diploma. So anytime I get to educate an attorney, it's a lot of fun for me.
I bet it is.
But here's the line that I've always used with sellers. And I have one right now. I coach people around the country in creative deal structuring. And I have a student who's trying to buy a mobile home park, and her attorney is trying to mess this up any way possible. Okay. And I said to her, I said, you just ask that attorney or ask the seller, is your attorney giving you a solution to your problem or just telling you to say no to mine? Because they're not giving you a solution. They're not going to give you the money that you need. They're not going to buy the house from you. They're just telling you to say no to my solution.
Yep.
And I have used that line many times. And it doesn't work every time, but it's true. Attorneys are there to look out for their best interest, allegedly, right?
Allegedly. I can give you a story about how that's not true all the time.
For sure. But that's really the same thing. We're doing the same thing with a different process.
Yeah.
I
love it.
So let's kind of switch gears to leads. I know you're chasing foreclosures. What are you doing today for lead generation?
So we've partnered with a company. This is going to be my plug. We've partnered with a company called Real Estate Bees. And what we found out with a lot of these PPL companies, you don't have a PPL company, do you?
No.
Okay, cool. So what we found out with a lot of these PPL companies is they are basically a middleman to the end buyer investor on the leads. They're not generating a lot of the leads on their own. They're just buying them from a lead generation company. And then we also figured out that a lot of these PPL companies will tell you that you are the only person that gets this PPL lead. That's not always the full truth because a lot of times there's a holding company that will get the leads, and then they have 4 or 5 different branches of that holding company that are the lead provider marketing companies to investors. So this company, the holding company, will get the lead. They'll sell it to XYZ PPL company. You're a client of XYZ PPL company, and you are the exclusive buyer of that lead for XYZ. But they also own ABC PPL company. They send that lead to ABC PPL company, and there's another person that's the exclusive buyer of that lead through ABC PPL company.
Mm-hmm.
So we went and did this deep dive to try to figure out who is actually providing the leads to the holding company. We figured out the Real Estate Bees is one of those companies that provides the actual leads to the holding company. And we just went directly to them and said, why are you selling these to a wholesaler? Why don't you just sell them directly to investors? So they started doing that, and they started sending us leads. And so now we get leads for $29 a lead, where most PPL companies are selling these things. I remember at one point we were buying leads from, I'm not gonna badmouth the company, but we were buying leads from a company, and in one county, the lead price, because it was a bidding system, had gone up to $900 a lead.
Yep.
For a lead. That's crazy. And now we're buying them for $29.
Yeah, the average in Wisconsin is between $175 to $400 per lead.
That's crazy.
Yep. Because of that bidding system, as you mentioned.
I don't like those bidding systems at all.
Well, it's good for the company that's doing it, and kudos to them for putting together a profitable, business. But
they're just lying to us about the fact that we're exclusive.
Of course. And they'll spin it and say, well, you are exclusive, except we have 4 other companies that are doing the same thing. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. So you're getting leads directly from there, and then you're chasing them. How are you chasing them? Are you reaching out to homeowners directly?
Yeah, so we've got a whole AI system that we have built out that texts and calls. And a lot of people will say, Ben, aren't homeowners, aren't they going to get upset when an AI bot is calling them and having conversations? We've ran this for 6 months. We've had 3 people get upset.
Mm-hmm.
Thousands and thousands and thousands of leads. And every single one of those 3 people who got upset, we called them and said, hey, listen, we can't get to every single lead as soon as they come in. We have this AI system so that we can get to you as fast as possible to try to solve your problem. I'm so sorry that, you weren't expecting an AI, but I'm here now. What can I do for you? And every single one of them was fine.
Yep. Are you challenged with do not call lists and all the the regulations around texting and all that stuff?
Not on PPL.
Because they requested somebody contact them.
Correct.
And that's your proof to protect yourself.
Correct. The foreclosures, you got to be a little bit more careful.
Mm-hmm.
But the PPLs, all day long.
Yep. And I knew that answer. I wanted to make that clear to the audience, right? Because there is a big difference. I have a friend who got, in hot water with the state they live in because they were cold calling. And in the end, they spent over $25,000 in attorney's fees to try and protect themselves, but their VAs were cold calling, but their VAs were direct employees of theirs.
Mm-hmm.
And, they had thousands of calls made to do not call lists, and the state was trying to make an example of them.
And they probably did.
Yeah, it didn't end up as bad as it could have. But when you look at the penalties, and I don't know the numbers, but it's per call a lot of money. So
yeah, I think it's what, $1,500 per call.
Yeah, it's something astronomical like that, for sure. So what's the outlook for you now? You got the AI set up. You're getting that. You primarily wholesaling these deals off? Most
of them are novations. Yeah.
Novations. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. we've got deals from Arkansas, South Carolina, Oklahoma, Missouri, Michigan, Kansas, Iowa, Tennessee. They're all over the place. So,
Mhm.
we obviously do a good bit of due diligence to keep updated on the laws as they change in a lot of these states, but not many states have cracked down on novations yet. I
Mhm.
think they will at some point. And then we'll just do what every real estate investor does. We'll pivot and figure out a way to get around it. And it's not even getting around it. It's just being creative about, you're going to throw a law in our face. We'll be creative about how we find the loopholes in said law.
Well, and literally you could pivot to options because options I mean, you're contractually in a novation contracting to buy that property,
Yep.
but with an option, you're typically paying for that option.
Yep.
And it doesn't mean you have to pay tens of thousands of dollars. I mean, an option has to have consideration.
Yeah.
Well, I've done options
$100.
where my consideration was I will maintain the house at my expense.
Fair.
I'm paying utilities. That's my consideration.
Mm-hmm.
Totally legit, you
Yeah,
know.
absolutely.
So, well, I'm going to ask you the hard question that my regular listeners know is coming. What's one question I should have asked you that I did not? And it can be about anything.
Knowing our past 18 months from an insider standpoint, one question that a lot of your listeners will probably get a lot of benefit from is how do you scale the wrong way? Because
Mm,
we've done it. And the answer is the kind of the first thing that we talked about, not having your agreements in place with partners or potential partners or JV partners, whatever that looks like. Two is you have to make sure that with your deals that you are on top of them to the end. Yes, we hire people to help with deals, title companies, closing attorneys. We hire people for that stuff. But you have to be on top of it because I can tell you, if you're not, and a title company botches a closing, you are going to get sued, which is what happened to us. And we're $180,000 into a lawsuit that on paper shows that we did everything right.
mhm.
And then third, don't bring friends or family into your business, please, for the love of God. My business partner's best friend of 48 years, 48 years. They talked every single day for their entire childhood. They grew up next to each other. This guy screwed us. We had just bought a painting company. It was doing really well. He ended up taking the crew, the manager, and running off and starting his own painting company and left us in a hole of $479,000.
Mm.
So I can tell you how to lose over $1 million. And if you don't, have your documents in place, make sure that you're in control of your deals all the way to the end. Don't, leave those to the wayside and go find more leads. You got to be on top of them at a minimum on a weekly basis. And then three, don't bring friends or family into your business. It's just a recipe for disaster. If you can do those things, you're going to see that scaling is a hell of a lot simpler. And one of the things that we learned that was, this aha moment for us, we were making 200 plus $1,000 a month. It was crazy. We were working like dogs. We did not have lives. I love to play golf. I hadn't played golf in like 8 months.
Mhm.
The money was amazing, but that was not what we wanted our lives to look like. So we took a giant step back and said, what do we actually want our lives to look like? We want to be able to travel when we want to travel. I want to own a farm. My business partner just wanted to be able to go. He's a big Disney guy. He wanted to be able to go to Disney with his family whenever he wanted to go to Disney with his family. And we wanted to play golf whenever the hell we wanted. There's a completely different route to take to get to that why, that end goal, than what we had built. So we stripped everything back. We cut our overhead from $60,000 a month down to 8. We leaned out our team, especially with AI right now. You don't have to have some crazy expensive full-time employees everywhere team. You can do this, and we do this. We do 12 to 15 deals a month with a 4-person team, 2 VAs, 2 commission closers, and me, which technically that's 5, but 2 full commission guys and then 2 virtual assistants, our AI running in the background, and me. And we do 12 to 15 deals a month.
What you just described is what we talk about here all the time, which is your vision. And my mantra is live your vision, love your life for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
Scaling and getting big, and been there, done that.
Yep.
It's usually not what it's all cracked up to be because you didn't necessarily visualize what you wanted in the end. And man, we could talk a whole nother show just on that. But
let me ask you one question before we jump.
Yeah.
Why did you want to, or why did you feel the need to build this massive business? Because I know what my answer was to that.
I think it was to prove that I could, and because other people said I should. It wasn't it wasn't my vision.
So you were going to masterminds, you were hanging out with all these guys that had built these massive businesses, and you're like, I can do that. I need to do that. And that's exactly what we did. Realized we weren't even chasing our own life. We were chasing some life that somebody else had put in front of us and said, this is what your life should look like.
Yep. Shiny object syndrome.
Uh-huh.
Yep. 100%. Well, Ben, man, thanks a lot for your time and just sharing your experience and being open about everything, that the good and the bad. I appreciate that more than you know.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And for everybody else, this is what it's all about. Ben and I kind of teaching you from our experiences, but it's all about building a network. It's all about living your vision, not somebody else's vision. And until the next show, go out, live your vision, and love your life. We'll see you next time.